Tonight, we'll dig into the movement to impeach President Trump and show why leading Democrats want no part of it.
He's brought us to the brink of nuclear war, obstructed justice at the FBI.
And if we fail to file these articles of impeachment, we would be failing to do our job.
And we'll ask Congressman Dennis Ross why Republicans could not replace Obamacare and what they learned from it as they try to cut taxes. And speaking of taxes.
And so you wind up with 2 gun ranges for the price of 2.
We'll work through the disagreement over this $1 million gun range in Pasco County.
I'm not sure about the disagreement. It never was a disagreement.
Just a misunderstanding.
Maybe so.
Plus, Professor Darryl Paulson explains why a true dark horse could win Florida's race for governor.
Politics comes from the ancient Greek word poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning ugly blood-sucking parasites.
This is Money, Power, and Politics.
Now, we focused much of this weekend on Michael Flynn's plea and what this means for the president. We'll map out more in the second half of our show, but we'll start with a tax plan that Republicans are rushing to the finish line here. This will change how much we pay. It'll drive some big changes likely to health care. This, simply put, is the future of our economy, and it's moving so quickly, some federal lawmakers say they don't even know what's in it.
We're going to cut taxes for the middle class, make the tax code simpler and more fair for everyday Americans.
I think it's going to benefit everybody. It's going to mostly benefit people looking for jobs more than anything else.
Well, the nonpartisan CBO report claims President Trump is wrong about that because in time, the CBO says people who make less than $75,000 a year would pay more, not less, under President Trump's tax plan. It also projects the plan would increase the deficit by another $1.4 trillion. So it puts Republicans who ran on cutting the deficit and warning how we're going broke in an awkward spot.
It is very important to me to know that we're not increasing deficits.
When Trump ran, he said he'd make up the difference by cutting federal money for education and for environmental protection.
Department of Environmental Protection. We are going to get rid of it in almost every form. We're going to have little tidbits left, but we're going to take a tremendous amount out. We have various other things.
But Chris Wallace called Trump out on that on the spot because the total education budget was $78 billion and the total budget for the EPA was $8 billion. You could cut all of that and not even come close to making up the difference, which brings us to Trump's call to cut various other things and buy things for less money. But Congress still spends much, much more than it gets, and we're more than $20 trillion in debt. The Republicans need to square that with their promise to cut the deficit if they hope to get this tax deal to the president's desk by Christmas without getting nailed by voters in the midterms. Of course, Republicans faced a similar challenge in replacing Obamacare. The CBO projections there showed premiums would shoot up and millions of people would lose health insurance. And that failed when Senator John McCain took it down. So Evan Axelbank asked Congressman Dennis Ross what Republicans can learn from their failure on health care.
I will not vote for this bill as it is today.
I firmly believe that John McCain may have had some sense of spite when he gave his vote, and that disappoints me. I think we can bring it back. I think we can make this thing happen. If not, we will react to a disaster in the next few years on health care.
Let's go all the way back to ancient history now, which is May, your vote.
Yes.
You voted to repeal Affordable Care Act. Independent studies said 68,000 people in your district would lose coverage.
I disagree with that.
Why do you disagree?
I disagree with that. That's the CBO. The Congressional Budget Office does a static
But these were
scoring.
independent studies too.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. It's because it's unaffordable. We would have at least had a market-based approach to make sure that consumers could buy the policies they needed at the prices they could afford. That's where people will buy it. Healthcare is very important. It's a necessity like food, like shelter. People will want to buy it, but they're not going to buy it when they can't afford it. And what we need to be able to do is create a market. And that first step is going to be a spike in prices. People are going to react by not having coverage. We're still going to be there. We're not going to take anybody off of Medicaid. But we've got to give the consumer choices. And we've got to give them a choice of policy.
Had you seen an independent study that backs you up on that? Had
Absolutely.
You seen, what was the independent study?
First of all, it's the law of economics. If you have a greater supply of healthcare opportunities out there, you're going to have a lower price. That's what it is. It is a market. It's not a one-size-fits-all that Obamacare has been. The government is not there to be all to everybody.
So had you seen any independent studies that backed up the claims that you made that premiums would go down and that the president made that?
Yeah, in fact, I can't quote them offhand, but I'll have to get back with you on it. But yes, I mean, I didn't make my decision just on willy-nilly and because I was a Republican. I made it because I firmly believe and I know that what's better for the consumers is for them to have choice, opportunities to have the decisions that they want to make for their health care. Right now, they don't have that.
There was no CBO score when you voted. Is that a responsible thing? One of the criticisms of the Republican Party...
There was a CBO score earlier.
But when one of the criticisms of the Republican Party was that the Democrats did things in secret. There were no hearings in Congress over these bills. There was no CBO score. How do you defend that?
Well, first of all, we know the CBO is absolutely off the mark.
You don't have faith in the CBO?
No, of course not. Again, they're static scoring. They're not. They're dynamic. They don't use dynamic scoring, and that's unfortunate. They were wrong about Obamacare. 22 million people are not on it. They said they were going to be. Look, Evan, the only way we're going to get health care to where it is what it needs to be is reaching across the aisle and getting Democrats on board.
So what are you going to do to reach across the aisle? What are the policies that you back that Democrats would?
First of all, across state lines. Cross-state line sale of health insurance policies is very, very good. Reduce the medical device tax or eliminate it. That's something that the Democrats and the Republicans agree on. We find common ground, we go forward with that.
You've said very clearly that the GOP has let the American people down, that Congress has let the American people down on health care. So does it rise to the point of the GOP owing an apology to those who voted for you on the promise to repeal this?
No, we still have time. We still have time. Well, we've got until the next election, but we also have time to do some other things.
Did the GOP oversell how easy this would be?
I'm sure we raised expectations to a level that we could not uphold. And I think you'll find through the history of almost every campaign, that's what campaigning is all about. When it comes to governing, it's a lot different. And I think we came face to face with that over the last 6 months. We've got to manage expectations much better and be very forward in our talking with the American people that this is what we need to do if we're going to go forward. Otherwise, we react to a crisis that will happen in health care, in tax reform, and probably within the economy.
Was the GOP unfairly critical of President Obama?
I don't think they were unfairly critical of him. In fact, I think that we were behind this president to get repeal and replace done.
Behind President Obama?
Oh, I'm sorry, behind President Trump. Yeah, when we went off the start of this year.
Okay.
Watch the rest of our interview on our YouTube channel. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe. You'll also find our series of investigations of wasted money in state and federal government.
Now, while tax cuts and health care pulled focus in Washington, the ground shook this week in state politics. We have some big changes to talk about in the race for governor after John Morgan dropped a bombshell for the Democrats.
I have the great luxury of being able to say exactly what I think.
John Morgan is blunt, wealthy, and a household name through all his time on TV. And since that combination helped drive President Trump to the White House, Democrats, including Obama's former campaign manager, urged John Morgan to run for governor. And he said he'd probably do it.
I think I'm leaning more that I will than I won't. I'm on a talking tour. And so I'm going to say things, answer the question without hedging, and then we'll kind of see how Florida takes me.
But turns out it took him out of the race and out of party politics. Morgan tweeted that he can't muster the enthusiasm to run for the Democratic nomination or for any of today's politicians in either party. So he plans to register as an independent and vote for, as he puts it, the lesser of two evils. That's a blow to the Democratic Party because it lost a major donor in John Morgan. And for now, it leaves the Democrats with 4 candidates for governor who most people have never heard of, like Gwen Graham, who's only served 1 term in Congress, though her father, former Governor Bob Graham, could help her stand out. Winter Park businessman Chris King and Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine are also unknown across most of the state, though both are wealthy and could pay to get noticed. Meanwhile, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum has been noticed for all the wrong reasons, with an FBI investigation of his city, though Gillum says he's not the target, and for sending political messages through his official office email.
I get the fact that the Republicans are going to make as much hay over this as they can. It's
Was it a mistake? Was it a mistake?
Absolutely, which we recognize.
Meanwhile, in the Republican race for governor, State Senator Jack Latvala is dealing with sexual harassment accusations that have wounded his bid. Agriculture Commissioner Adam Putnam may have the inside track for now. But that could change if, or more likely when, Congressman Ron DeSantis or State House Speaker Richard Corcoran enter the race.
More money? Well, Corcoran said he'll announce his decision after next year's legislative session. And by the way, John Morgan said he won't run in the Democratic race. He did not rule out running as an independent. Now, we don't have much polling to go by just yet, but the early numbers favor Putnam in the Republican race. But check out this poll a couple of months ago from FAU. Around half of Republicans are undecided. In the Democratic race, Morgan had the lead, followed by Graham. But again, nearly half are undecided. People are not focusing on the race yet. And somebody, maybe we're not talking about yet, could shoot up the charts you may not expect. Here is author Professor Darryl Paulson on why our next governor could come out of nowhere. Do you see a dark horse who can surprise a lot of people in either party?
Well, that wouldn't surprise me one bit, because we are in the age of what I consider to be dark horse politics. I mean, President Obama was essentially a dark horse candidate. I mean, he had a very limited career in the Illinois legislature. He served 3 years in the Senate before becoming president of the United States. Governor Rick Scott had no political credentials before becoming governor. And I think that's the tendency now, to move to the new phase. People don't like politicians. I've often said politics comes from the ancient Greek word poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning ugly blood-sucking parasites. And so many people believe that's the actual definition of it. So they have this profound hatred of politics that they're turning elsewhere.
Meanwhile, Governor Rick Scott has not made it official, but he will likely challenge Florida senior Senator Bill Nelson. Scott is a strong supporter of President Trump, and that may work against him given Trump's low approval ratings. Plus, Governor Scott's had low approval ratings himself for years. But his performance through Hurricane Irma did give him a boost, and polls show he's virtually tied with Nelson before Scott enters the race. Once more, Paulson called out Nelson's problem as only he can.
The strange thing about Bill Nelson is, I've said if he walked into the Cheers bar, nobody would know his name. Instead of shouting Norm, they wouldn't shout Bill because they don't know him. And what's strange about that is he's been in Florida politics for 40 years. He's been our United States Senator for 18 years, and yet the polls show that 1/3 of Floridians have no idea who Bill Nelson is. Part of his strength is that he doesn't offend anyone, but at the same time, he hasn't got any real policy issue. I think it would be hard-pressed to find people when you ask, well, what has Bill Nelson done? What is his big policy item? That they could point to one specific thing.
Okay, so coming up, we'll take a look at the Trump factor in Florida, how Flynn and the Mueller investigation plays into it, and the risk of a shutdown next week, and insight on North Korea from former director of Intel operations at CENTCOM E.J. Otero. Pasco deputies say they need to train with real bullets, but a state college demanded compressed air bullets instead, which brings us to a $1 million dispute in tonight's We the People.
The line ready? If your job is to stop killers and save lives,
move quick, draw quick, shoot slow,
and you need a place to train,
threat. Excellent work, Jenkins.
Most people would want you to have the best.
Nice, smooth trigger presses.
And that's why the Pasco Sheriff's Office asked state lawmakers for $1 million to spruce up this firing range at Pasco Hernando State College, so deputies could have a better place to train.
All the wood in here has been replaced. The targets are designed to move. They weren't.
And that money spruced up quite a bit.
They've extended some of the concrete, the lighting systems that you see here now to allow night fire and limited light fire didn't exist.
So after the college spent the $1 million, deputies had everything they needed to fire live ammo, until the college told them they can't fire live ammo.
I'm sorry, that's a 0.
I was thinking that this is why our citizens don't respect their governments in a lot of ways.
State Senate Majority Leader Wilton Simpson secured that $1 million for the range, and he could not believe it.
It was very disappointing for us to be asked for a request of any amount of money, but $1 million. And then after we had the enhancements done and the request was honored, then we couldn't use that facility.
For years, the college said deputies could not use lead bullets because lead could contaminate the ground.
There's no reason for lead ammunition to ever reach the grass here.
Even though the bullets fire into traps that feed into pipes that feed into a barrel that collects all the lead.
It's a safer collection process.
While machines suck up lead particles that may be in the dust.
It's a dust vacuum, yeah. And then there's a Also the concrete underneath, and then they have another layer underneath of that to, for rain drainage.
But for the college president, Dr. Timothy Beard, that wasn't enough.
The ammunition never touches the earth.
That's not true.
He feared bullets flying past the range and lodging into the dirt.
You'd have to be a pretty horrific shot.
Which we have sometimes cadets and officers missing.
Have you ever seen a sheriff's deputy with Pasco County fire a bullet so errant that it misses this altogether and lodges up into the dirt?
No, not, and I've been out here. I've been with the training unit for almost 6 years now.
Beyond that back and forth, the sheriff's office also says allowing live ammo was part of the deal for getting the $1 million tax dollars.
On the condition that Pasco deputies be allowed to use lead ammunition.
Yes, yeah, that's my understanding as well.
But the college president does not remember it that way.
Well, I'm not sure who told you that.
The sheriff's office did.
Oh, okay, well, I'm not sure about the disagreement. It never was a disagreement.
Just a misunderstanding.
Maybe so.
Either way, the Pasco sheriff said shooting frangible bullets, that's compressed copper powder, won't do because it can affect a shooter's aim and a trainer's ability to score the shot, because frangible means it breaks up on impact.
It's very hard to evaluate a deputy sheriff.
Threat. Smooth.
The accuracy when the equipment that they're using has inaccuracies kind of built into it.
So the county found some land across town, and the sheriff budgeted another $350,000 to build a different range. And guess what happened after the sheriff petitioned the county for the new range?
Yeah, so we added 80,000 to the million.
And the college spent more money protecting its land from lead, then told the deputies they can use live ammo after all.
And so you wind up with 2 gun ranges for the price of 2.
Threat.
The Pasco Sheriff's Office says it can use both because it needed some more capacity anyway.
All of your rounds were all low left that time, so you're probably yanking that trigger again.
But this story of conflicting stories, contradictions, and mounting costs shows what happens when governments are not on the same page.
Threat.
In a classic case of ready, fire, and then aim.
2 rounds, target number 1.
Okay, on now to North Korea, which tested a new long-range missile and has repeatedly threatened to nuke the United States, which, of course, brings us some questions for our resident expert on North Korea. Okay, well, please welcome retired Colonel E.J. Otero, former Director of Intelligence Operations at CENTCOM. Thank you for your time.
A pleasure.
Should the United States preemptively strike North Korea?
No, it would be a big mistake at this point. Any preemptive strike without an actual physical display from North Korea would be unwise.
So if we go to war with North Korea, how long would it take for us to defeat them?
I think we would degrade them like we have done in the past in recent examples. We would degrade them to the point of non-effectiveness in 2 to 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks?
Yes, and after that it would be cleanup.
Is Kim Jong-un a psychopath?
Absolutely.
Crazy?
He is insane. This is a gentleman that he has grown in his cocoon. He has grown as a child in a world in which he is the center of the universe. No exposure to the rest of the world, real exposure, like his father and grandfather who faced the Korean War. This man believes that when you tell your country, this is the haircut that I want you to get, and they do, and you believe that everything that you say the world has to bow to you, you're a psychopath.
But if you are insane and believe the universe revolves around you, wouldn't you just say, well, I can flatten things too. Here goes.
He could do that, and that is a wild card.
On that sobering note, Colonel Otero, thank you.
Pleasure.
Coming up, a $20 million ad campaign to impeach President Trump. Who's really behind this and where the players on Capitol Hill line up? You've probably seen the ads calling for President Trump's impeachment, so Mike Flannery now shows us how both parties are responding in Washington.
He's brought us to the brink of nuclear war, obstructed justice at the FBI.
Paid for by a liberal California billionaire, these ads have for weeks been urging voters to demand President Trump's impeachment.
And tell your member of Congress that they have a moral responsibility to stop doing what's political and start doing what's right. Our country depends on it.
Chicago's Representative Luis Gutierrez could have been channeling that ad as he joined 5 other Democrats to file formal articles of impeachment.
The Judiciary Committee, on which I sit with Steve Cohen, is the place where impeachment starts, is the place where impeachment starts, and if we fail to file these articles of impeachment, we would be failing to do our jobs.
Republican majority is sure to reject it, but top Democrats do too. Right after Gutierrez spoke, House Democratic Whip Steny Hoyer criticized impeachment. Disagreeing with the policies is not enough to overturn an election, a free and fair election. The new impeachment resolution accuses the president of such high crimes as obstruction of justice, taking money from foreign governments at his resort hotels, profiting off the U.S. government, hundreds of thousands of dollars collected from Secret Service agents alone at his properties, undermining the rule of law by attacking judges, undermining freedom of the press by attacking journalists. A separate resolution to impeach President Trump was introduced earlier this year by Texas Democrat Al Green. He's vowed to press for a vote by the full House before Christmas. I'm Mike Flannery. Craig, back to you.
Coming up, the fall of Flynn and the Mueller investigation. Well, Flynn's plea means Mueller's investigation is still a long way from finished. Much more on our YouTube channel. Craig Patrick, Money, Power, and Politics. Have a good night.